going live on YouTube as well. So yeah, we'll be starting in just a second. Pull up my voice recorder. Hi everyone, we'll be starting in just a second. This is our last stream on Mixer. We'll talk more about that later in the show. For those of you who are on Mixer, I strongly recommend you switch over to the YouTube stream going forward.
Okay, got that ready. Got my script. All right.
So yeah, we'll do a countdown, Adam, and just clap. So Dan will do 3, 2, 1, clap. Just clap with him. It may sound out of sync to you, but for us, it's.
I should clap as well.
Yes, please.
Yes. That's just so we can sync the audio up later.
Clap and hit record. Is that possible?
No. Hit record and let it start running, and then Dan will do the clap, and then just clap.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you'll tell me when to hit record.
Yep.
This is very analog.
It's just for backup purposes in case we lose the master, which has happened.
Super smart.
Right, I'm ready to go when you are.
I am too. All right, so we all hit record.
Yep.
Okay, I'm hitting record.
Great.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Great.
Oh, that was synced.
Yes.
Worked very well. Hey everyone, welcome to the Windows Central podcast, episode 184 for June 26, 2020. Hey everyone, Daniel Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central podcast, where we discuss all things Microsoft, Windows, Surface, and Mixer, and Xbox, and whatever is happening in the week of tech. This week we got a bunch of things talking about, including, well, Microsoft's closing a lot of stuff, including Mixer.com, which we're on right now, as well as its Microsoft stores, which the physical stores, we should say, not the online store, but the physical stores will be closing, which is not surprising, but also very disappointing. We'll also have a discussion about ARM and Apple and how that's going to affect Microsoft and Windows and the project there, and kind of basically how better, that Microsoft is, how much better Apple is doing than Microsoft in regards to its operating system. And Zach, I just realized I forgot to turn my RTX voice when I did the clap, which means when we did our sync, my clap will be filtered out. Oh well, we'll figure that out later. Anyway, before we do all of that, we're going to go right to an interview, which I like to start doing more of because this stuff is really interesting for you guys. And I'd like to introduce Adam Levinson. He's a Senior Director of Business Development and Marketing, Consumer Electronics Division at Waves Audio. And if you ever heard of Waves, you may have bought a Dell laptop. They're one of the major partners with Waves. And basically, they do the tuning of the hardware, so the software ends, to make the speakers do what they do. And, Dell has, over the years, improved audio, just like everybody else has. And this year, Waves is doing something really interesting that's starting with the XPS 15, which, yes, my review is still coming. It's been one of those weeks again. But what makes that laptop super interesting is not only does it now have 4 speakers instead of 2, and 2 are top firing, so they're actually good sounding, but there is also now this new software on there that does 3D positional audio. Adam, why don't you give us a quick background on who you are, where you got your start from, and basically what you do at Waves?
Sure. Hey, it's great to be here. Really great to have this opportunity to talk to you guys. My title is kind of a mouthful, right? Marketing and business development. I wear 2 hats at Waves. I do a lot of the marketing communications work, and I also am involved on the business development side. So, looking at new endeavors, new initiatives, and it's kind of a cool symbiosis between those 2 things because I learn a lot about the business as I'm doing the marketing. It really feeds into each other. I don't want to talk too much about myself, but I started off my career as a musician, and Daniel, you and I were just talking about going to school in Boston back in the day. I was actually a percussionist, and I was at Boston University studying orchestral music. I made my living as a musician for the first 10 years of my adult life. I know, made a living as a musician is kind of an oxymoron. It's like, does that really happen? And what came out of that was I eventually moved to California, got my master's degree, and started working with dance companies. And one of the choreographers I was working with had a husband who was involved in multimedia development. This was 1992. And he loved my music, and he said, "Hey, can you do music and sound for my multimedia thing?" Which was like this fantastic voyage through the human body. And it was like CD-ROM technology, and I just thought it was the most amazing thing ever, because it was like video and music and sound and art all combined. And that launched my career in video games. I became a sound designer in video games. I climbed up the creative ladder in the video game space, became an audio director. I eventually led Activision, a name you might be familiar with. I was head of sound worldwide for Activision for many years, and then made a big decision to move over to the business side. It's just where my interests were. It's just how things evolved. And now I am fully, invested and inspired by all the cool stuff that happens in audio. But my focus is business. But really, since I was a little kid, it's just audio and sound just really runs through my blood. Whether it's hitting a cymbal or talking to you guys, it's the stuff that gets me excited. And I was very fortunate to get connected with Waves about a year and a half ago. Of course, most people are familiar with Waves as the leading professional audio technology company. But actually, Waves has this really productive, prolific division here in the Bay Area devoted to consumer electronics. And we'll talk about how those things are connected and the cool connection between pro audio and consumer electronics. Started with them about a year and a half ago, and it's just been wonderful, great journey.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, so Dell and Waves have had a partnership for a long time, and
Yes.
we discussed this earlier about how companies, HP has Bang & Olufsen, Dell has you guys. Lenovo, I think, works with Dolby sometimes. Microsoft does their own stuff. So this space has been kind of heating up, which has been good because it's one area where Apple has always had this advantage, which is just very good hardware and audio out of their laptops. Meanwhile, I remember business laptops being like, they'll throw in speakers on the bottom, they're tinny. It's like they were just enough to do like a conference call. But the idea behind it was it doesn't matter to that customer. Like, it's not a big deal. If they really want audio, they'll put headphones on, end of story. And the world has changed where people now want one device that they want to use basically for as much as they can, whether it's gaming, watching movies while traveling, or doing work. And now audio has become sort of this big deal. So let's talk specifically about this XPS 15, the 9500. It's a pretty amazing laptop. The XPS line has always been, it's one of our top recommended laptops. And the XPS 15 just has the first redesign in 5 years. And so you guys were sort of a part of that. Explain to the audience a couple things. First of all, let's talk about the new 3D positional audio, why that's a big deal, especially because it used to be on headphones, but now it's with speakers. But also just the challenges of laptop audio. And I know you don't speak for Dell or HP or these other companies, but why is it hard for companies to sort of do good audio? Like, what are the challenges there?
Yeah, so maybe we should start there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, if you think about it, right, when you think about sound and music, and maybe you call this image of a speaker in your mind, right? And speakers are like these acoustically designed devices. Everything about that thing has been designed for the purpose of reproducing sound in the best possible manner, at least with really good speakers. The enclosure, the hardware, the speaker itself, how it fits into that box, right? The space around it. whatever, buttons and options it has that comes with it. It's all for one thing, making great sound. Now think about like your laptop or your smartphone or other consumer electronics devices that you have in your possession that you use all the time. It's basically a rectangle object that has no acoustic principles to it whatsoever. And to your point, Daniel, back in the day, when not that long ago, really, when the laptop was truly like an office productivity machine, I mean, you didn't expect it to do anything really great with acoustics. So what has changed, as you just articulately pointed out, is expectations. The consumer really wants, we all as consumers really want our laptops to give it all. We want to be able to really enjoy entertainment. We want to be having a conference call like this where we can hear each other and enjoy a conversation. We want to be able to listen to music and have it fill the room. These are really really high benchmarks, high levels of expectations now. So we got to take this rectangular box thing that is getting slimmer and slimmer and sleeker and more unacoustical, and we got to make it sound awesome. And that is totally where Waves fits in. It is, as you mentioned earlier, all about that speaker design. Where are the speakers? On the Dell XPS 15, as you mentioned, they are up firing right in front of you, right? And there's actually 4 of them. It's a quad speaker design. So it starts with that acoustical step that the manufacturer makes. They say, this is important. We're going to put these speakers right in front of you, and we're going to make them really high quality. Then it's the Waves technology right on top of that. And then it is actually hands-on tuning. Hands-on tuning. These machines are tuned, in this case, by a Grammy award-winning music producer. The XPS 15, amazingly, was tuned by a masterful artist who, mixes for Lady Gaga and Pharrell and many other amazing names and celebrities that we're familiar with. So it's that kind of 3-point combination that you're really getting the benefit of on the XPS 15. Now, you asked about 3D sound.
Yeah.
So this is a fascinating thing because remember how we talked about the up-firing speakers on the XPS, right? Well, right. There's actually 2 grills. There's 2 grills that are shielding these 4 quad design speakers, right? It is not a surround system. These speakers are not all around you. We have this technology at Waves called NX. Now, NX was originally released in around 2016 as a spatial audio solution over headphones. Now, the thing about NX that is special and different from all of the other spatial technologies out there is it was designed for recording engineers originally. So recording engineers, they want to be able to take their laptop, especially now, go wherever they want to, put on a pair of headphones and do their work, mix the music, mix a movie soundtrack. But what's the headphone experience normally? The headphone experience normally is inside of your head. Whereas when you're listening to music and you're working with music and movie soundtracks in a studio, it's externalized, right? The whole purpose of NX on headphones is to put you in a virtual acoustic space. It's not just spatial audio, it's actually a space. It's a perfectly tuned acoustic space. So on headphones, by the way, you still get that on the XPS 15 and the new 17. You still have NX headphones technology, but now, for the first time, we are providing that NX technology over speakers. So you're now getting spatial audio over speakers. And it is truly, if you guys have experienced this yet, I know you said you haven't reviewed the laptop yet, but
I'm using it. I got it right in front of me. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. When you do it, you're going to find that it is a trippy panoramic audio experience. It truly wraps around you. And like we said, there's only 2 speakers. There's only 2 speaker, grills with this quad speaker design, right? It does that through this science called psychoacoustics. Psychoacoustics. It actually tricks your mind into perceiving the sound all around you. And we have other psychoacoustic driven technology at Waves. It's this remarkable thing where through evolution, our brains have been trained to perceive certain cues in sound and, to be able to localize sound. And we can actually play with that perception. And that's how Waves NX over speakers works. So you have to actually turn it on the XPS 15 and 17. But when you do, I think you'll find it's a truly panoramic, immersive experience.
Yeah, we've been seeing quite a lot of movement in this area. Razer just last week, I believe, released their THX audio app for Windows 10, which works over headphones. Of course, DTS has their app too on Windows, and there's Dolby out there. And what makes it all interesting is you make that good point about is one of those things you learn about in college in biology is like how kind of dumb the human sensory system is. Like it works and it does its job, but it's also once you understand how it works, you can understand how to hack it. And that's essentially what you guys are doing is you're hacking the audio system to fool us into hearing things. And so if anyone here has a home audio setup, you're probably familiar with this. You used to need, ideally a 5.1. If you had a 2.1 system, it was nice. 5.1 is great. Then 7.1 came out. And then I love, Dolby Atmos was basically just like, it's just as many speakers as you want.
Right. Over your head. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to, and then it kept creating these new channels, right? Over the head, behind. I remember, we were talking about this earlier before the podcast when I was a projectionist. I ran one of the first theaters that ran, was it Dolby Digital EX? I think it was. It was a rear center channel. And it was the first time they've ever used it. It was for Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, I believe it was.
Cool.
And it was supposed to idea of like, so when something would go over your head, you would hear it behind you then. But what's really interesting now is, this idea of simulation. So even if you don't have 10 speakers or don't install them in your ceiling, you can simulate that. And this stuff is getting, as you mentioned, creepily good. Like I have the HyperX headphones that have, I forgot their technology that they're using, but it's also a 3D.
That's our technology.
Oh, that's your okay, yeah.
Yes.
And so those are that's right, because I remember we had this discussion. When I got them, it was 2 a.m. I was like, this box has been sitting on the ground for days, and I finally put them on. I was up for another 90 minutes because I was so blown away by how weird it was. I'd be listening to music, I'd hear the guitar up over here, and it was actual spatial. You can actually point into space where you. And what was more fascinating was when you moved your head, it actually adjusted the sound around you to make that even realistic. So that technology is really, I just think, super fascinating. It's kind of great to see.
Well, I was just going to say. Oh, continue.
No, go ahead. No,
I was going to say you brought up head tracking.
Yeah.
So head tracking is one of these novel technologies when it's outside of VR that we use in conjunction with our NX 3D audio technology to produce that natural experience. Because of course, when you're listening on headphones and looking at your laptop or listening to sound or music on your laptop and you've got your headphones on, you turn your head, well, the sound turns with you normally. Of course, that's not how sound is experienced in the real world. If you turn your head and sound moves with you in the real world, something is very wrong. So we use head tracking to provide that natural experience. Over speakers, what NX does with the head tracking is it ensures that no matter where you are in relation to the laptop, you're getting good fidelity. So it's like you might be a little off axis. We adjust the fidelity to ensure that even off axis, you're getting that full spatial experience. That's a really novel application of head tracking.
Yeah, that's, I find super fascinating. For those, just kind of tuning in, we're talking with Adam Levinson from Waves Audio, discussing basically sound and laptops and how it works and the challenges there, as well as the new XPS 15's really, really good audio system that uses this 3D positional audio. And yeah, there's this ability to, the web camera has just been increasingly more interesting ever since Microsoft added Windows Hello to it. This idea that it can scan your face and log you into your laptop. And now we're getting this other usage of it, where that web camera can then see where your head is in space and adjust accordingly to do the head tracking. And I think that's just a super cool thing to be able to do in a laptop, making use of something that's already there. We already got the camera, might as well use it for free, right? To improve the audio. So I think that's like just really kind of cool stuff. I know we talked about privately too about this, sort of the what's kind of coming next in audio, this idea of machine learning. I've mentioned numerous times on this podcast, I'm using NVIDIA RTX voice. So when my old senior cat meows like crazy, you guys don't hear it. And it's really remarkable technology but it's also not completely practical for all applications, specifically laptops. It can be a challenge due to the processing. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on machine learning and how that's going to be impacting sound in the coming years? And what are sort of the challenges there with that technology? And I guess whatever else you feel that's super interesting about audio right now.
That is super interesting. So artificial intelligence and machine learning are definitely the next big thing. And, if you rewind to maybe a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, everyone was talking about machine learning, right? It was this buzzword. But now we're really seeing things manifest. We're now seeing technologies actually come to market, and we're now actually able to experience these technologies. And I believe, and we believe at Waves, that this is going to be transformative. So, you can think about the evolution of audio technology at Waves as being kind of in 3 stages, where like stage 1 was audio in, audio out, and there's a preset. It's like, here's how your audio sounds best with movies. Turn that on, you get your movie, it goes through the preset, which was tuned by, a master sound engineer, and then it comes out and it sounds terrific, right? Next stage was like adaptive. Okay, so I've got my movie, it's going into the preset and it's coming out. But in that flow chart, there's also this consideration of what's the position of my laptop lid in relation to the speakers. And I'm going to maybe load a different preset based on the position of my laptop lid, or perhaps it's my laptop is on a flat surface as opposed to being in my hand. These kind of sensor-related adaptive adjustments, that's kind of level 2. Level 3 is machine learning-driven continuous adaptability, continuous awareness. So we look at this as, we call it the seamless sound experience. That's where we're headed, where we're talking about pristine fidelity in any environment. So your machine is aware of where you are, how you hear, what you're listening to, and making continuous adjustments, making continuous intelligent tweaks based on all of those different contextual variables, and producing really the experience that I think we're all looking for, which is just the enjoyment of music, the enjoyment of movies, the enjoyment of having a conversation like this without worrying about any of the obstacles that we currently have to deal with. Noise, the cat, the dog, the door closing, this movie's too loud compared to the thing I just listened to. All of that stuff just is going to slide away with this new movement towards machine learning driven algorithms. Now, the algorithms that, and we should maybe define that word, the algorithms, the technologies that are currently making this, I'm on an XPS, making this call sound great, are not going to go away. The driver, the thing that's in the driving position is changing. That's where the machine learning comes in. The machine learning will be tweaking the knobs and moving the sliders and basically being your sound engineer on the fly. So, this is truly exciting. And I am personally really looking forward to that advancement, because right now I think, device interoperability and differences between content types and noise, these things they make the experience less than it could be.
Yeah. I was going to say too, and even when it comes to headphones and audio, especially outside, the biggest thing is always wind. And so companies have been spending years to engineer the microphones to not pick up wind. But when you get to this sort of software end, it can sort of, fix what's going on there. But when it comes to the processing, there's generally two ways we think about this. There's discrete local, which is how like something like RTX voice does, as far as I know. So it's going to use the GPU and the processor to make that magic happen. But there's also sort of cloud versions of this. And do you see both of those playing a factor in there? Because the idea of like running, heavy machine learning for your audio call on a super thin and light client probably is not the best solution. Although with multi-cores and dedicated CPUs, maybe that can be solved. But how do you see, companies basically solving that problem?
You are going right to the center of like the main topic of conversation that is happening right now as we speak, which is what should be in the cloud and what should be on the local device. I mean, if you look at the number of Waves technologies that are working right now as we're having this phone call, it's crazy. We are deeply into this Dell XVS. There's so many things that are improving the quality of the sound in real time as we're talking, as we're listening to music or watching a movie, and all of it's happening on the device. We are definitely seeing a movement towards bringing some of that processing into the cloud. And as you said, it makes perfect sense. If we can offload some of that processing to the cloud, then the machine itself can perform better and better. So I think what we're going to see, and truly this is happening as we speak, is a symbiosis between what's happening in the cloud and what's happening on the machine, and really some very strategic decisions that need to be made in the very near future about, okay, what is good on the cloud and what is optimal on the device itself, and starting to make those moves in terms of where technology should live, and literally it is evolving. And if you look at what's happening in Teams with what was, I think it's called Google Meet or Google Meets, I can never.
Who knows? Yeah.
All of these VoIP services are making movement towards providing some processing in the cloud. So it is definitely about the symbiosis between cloud and client.
That's awesome stuff. Very good. I wish we talked a little bit more about this, but we'll definitely have to have you back on sometime, especially when you guys do. Yeah, especially when you guys do something new and you guys want to talk about it. How we take for granted sometimes just audio around us, but the science behind it. If you've ever gone and studied how all the acoustics works, it's super fascinating. Especially once, like I'm fascinated by the hacking part, just how we're tricking the sensory system into hearing stuff that's actually not there. It just blows my mind. But very good stuff. Adam, do you want to plug should we find you anywhere on Twitter? Do you want to plug anything before?
Absolutely. You can learn more about Waves. The consumer electronics division is at maxx.com, maxx.com. And then you can learn more about our professional audio division and our live sound division at waves.com. Go check it out.
Great. Well, and once again, everybody, Adam Levinson, Senior Director of Business Development and Marketing, Consumer Electronics Division at Waves Audio. You can catch his work in the new XPS 15 9500, as well as the new XPS 17, which I am getting in soon as well. And of course, I will have the review for the XPS 15 shortly. But it's been a real pleasure. We're really glad you can join us, and hopefully our audience learned a little bit. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we'll see you later.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye. And yeah, you can stop your recording now, and then we just send it over to Zach, or we can email it or something like that to us.
Okay, fantastic. I'll email it to you. I'll email it to you.
Sounds
awesome.
Good.
Have a great rest of your podcast.
Thanks,
Bye.
Adam.
Thanks.
Bye.
Right. Since we had to pause there anyway, Dan, do you want to do a clap sync again?
We can.
In the same recording.
Yeah. All right. All right. Now I've turned off RTX.
Fantastic.
All right. So 3, 2, 1.
Great. All right. So what's our next story? Hang on. We'll jump straight into Mixer.
Yeah. Everything that Microsoft is shutting down this week.
Sure. So go ahead.
So, all right. Going back to the news this week. So, if you guys haven't been following, Microsoft's been having this is the Nadella era where things, if they don't make money, and they don't have, it's not just that they don't make money, it's that they have no prospect to make money. So we have two stories here. One is Mixer, the other one's Microsoft Stores, the physical ones shutting down. I don't think any of this is a surprise to people. Mixer has struggled for the last year, especially. And they made a lot of high profile moves. The technology was great. I think many of us preferred the name Beam before when it was bought out. But it was a neat service, and it was actually joyful to use. It reminded me of GroupMe, where it was just delightful. It was just kind of nice. But Twitch was well established. And that's a problem. But at the same time, you could argue, and I think Microsoft felt this way, that esports was still early enough on that they could carve their way in there, and if they can get this technology into Xbox and build it into Windows 10, which they did pretty rapidly, they could just make this the default experience. And on paper, that should have worked. And it's still kind of a mystery. Some of the information is coming out why, Mixer degraded over the last couple of years, whether there was a lot of it, I think, has to do with the culture of Microsoft, unfortunately. We've heard this before. It's kind of like the Nokia situation, it sounds like, where they make this big value purchase, they try to rebrand it and bring it into the Microsoft thing. And a lot of the people who made that original magic happen ended up sometimes coming along, but then leaving a few months later, getting kind of disenfranchised. And then old school Microsoft people come in and take over the division and start meeting these other sort of, criteria. And we've heard a lot about like people not happy working there, just issues going on, and technical problems, not focusing on real concerns game streamers had. There was the promotion stuff. There are people, what was it? They were running 24/7, streams that were getting more priority. And so, yeah, I forgot what's the date that they're shutting down. It's July 7th or something?
I thought it was July 22nd or 21st.
Oh, 22nd.
It's later in July. But this news came as quite a shock to a lot of people on Mixer, of course. Because a lot of streamers, that's their day job. They do this for a living. They do it to make money and to get by. And Mixer shutting down, a few people found a relatively comfortable, I wouldn't say comfortable, maybe comfortable, I don't know. So they found careers on Mixer because they were streaming, people were following them, they were subscribing to their channels, and they were making money. And now Microsoft has announced Mixer's closing down. Those people essentially have to start from scratch on another streaming service such as Twitch or YouTube Gaming. And it's hard to build an audience on these streaming platforms. If you've ever tried to become a streamer, it's not something that just happens. You have to work at it, you have to build it, you have to be likable, you have to be entertaining, you have to... there's a lot goes into being a streamer. So when you find success on one platform, unless you're like super famous on the internet, like some YouTubers and whatnot, you can't just move platforms. It's not as easy as that. But for these people, they're going to have to try. Now, Microsoft did announce that they're partnering with Facebook to sort of handle the transition. There's a bridge that they're building for Mixer partners who, if they would like to continue being a partner, they can move to Facebook Gaming, which I haven't heard too many good things about. Facebook Gaming. Facebook Gaming is Facebook, and a lot of people aren't a huge fan of Facebook. So a lot of the streamers here, I think, are looking to Twitch and YouTube Gaming, which are the big players in the streaming world when it comes to like watching video games and stuff. So it is unfortunate for a lot of people. It is really sad as well because Microsoft, as you mentioned, Dan, they sort of acquired Beam, they rebranded it to Mixer. They made this big deal. They pushed it on Xbox. They pushed it on Windows 10. And then a lot of like controversial bits and pieces of info came from inside the company about how the leadership was saying weird things. I haven't read up on this, but I think there was like some racist comment or something where someone didn't apologize for saying something, and there's been a lot of unnecessary internal controversy which just shouldn't be happening, and Microsoft should have dealt with that, and they haven't, and they didn't. So now, lots of accusations of sexism and abuse and stuff. So this is. It is unfortunate, but this news came at a worse time. Just as sort of the racist news was popping up on social media, Microsoft announced that Mixer was closing down. So it looks like that to solve the problem, they're just washing their hands with it. Which this was planned for months, by the way. This hasn't just come up this week.
Right. Yeah, it is kind of funny because the weekend before, there's been a lot of high-profile game streamers being accused of sexual misconduct and pretty terrible things. And it was quite a few. They were on Twitch, they were on Mixer. It was a bunch of them. And it just seems like Microsoft's like, oh, well, we're done anyway out of it. So no more problem there. This stuff bothers me only because it's like, we're obviously kind of fans of Microsoft here, but at the same time, they are this big monolithic corporation. And a lot of ex-employees have written about sort of like, Nadella's new culture push at Microsoft is good. Like when you talk to the younger employees and everybody there, they're actually do like where the company is going. The problem is you still have a lot of like people who've been in the company for 20, 30 years who are not part of that new wave. This is the whole like boomer versus millennial thing, I don't want to simplify that easily, but you do get these sort of kind of career managers and program managers who come in and aren't on the same wavelength as the younger generation is. And you're still getting these kind of conflicts. And it is interesting that some people within Microsoft, and this isn't unique to Microsoft, but if you've been with a company for 20 or 30 years, like the idea that you can basically side promote yourself, and they're actually encouraged to do that, to leave divisions and stuff like that. But sometimes you're just pushing people around and they're not the right person for that. I mean, you can make the argument for Windows. Was Terry Myerson the right guy to do all this stuff in Windows 10? I think it's mixed, right? I don't want to say Terry Myerson was bad, but there were decisions he made that were probably not great, right? And priorities he chose. And you could say the same thing with Steve Sinofsky, right? He made this big bet with Windows 8 and it really misfired. And now we're getting, Panos in charge of Windows, and maybe that will be nice. This issue affected Windows Phone for a long time. That division was shuffled around. It was its own thing. Then they brought it into kind of Windows, and the management there was different. There's different priorities. Steve Sinofsky famously didn't care at all about Windows Phones for what I knew. He just focused on the Windows 8. And Windows Phone kind of just was pushed to the side. This is just, it's a problem with these big companies. It's a shame that, people lost their jobs here. As you mentioned, the game streamers who rely on this for income, can't just, they're going to try to switch, but now they got to redefine themselves on a new platform. I think the Facebook thing was a good move. It was basically the only move they could have done. They could have just wiped it clean, but that would have been really bad. Yeah. This reminds me of like with Groove shutting down, and they're like, but you can transition to Spotify and sync all your stuff over. It still was a drop in the bucket for what many of us appreciated Groove for, but it was probably the right decision. And now, not to bring up Groove again, but I'm a huge Spotify user now, so it kind of worked. Right?
Thanks, Microsoft.
Yeah. But that was sort of, but now I'm using Spotify. I'm like, Spotify is actually pretty amazing. And the fact is, it's like, I said this before, Spotify is in my Tesla, like built in.
Groove would have never been there.
Never been built in. So like, there are benefits. And Facebook has that same sort of thing, which is reach, right? Yeah. Facebook sucks. We all hate Facebook. Zach and I aren't Facebook users.
Over 1 billion users, so.
But it's over 1 billion people, and it gets faces on there. Yeah. And so for game streaming, I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of game streamers having a better experience on Facebook streaming. But
the other thing that just baffles my mind about this, it baffles my mind, like the whole Ninja and Shroud thing. So Microsoft spent a lot of money acquiring Shroud and Ninja from Twitch. They were big on Twitch, and Microsoft paid them millions of dollars to come and join Mixer. This was late last year, early this year. This wasn't long ago. The number I've seen for Ninja was, I think, $30 million. I mean, I can't confirm that, but assuming that number is correct, that is a lot of money for 6 months on Mixer. The original contract, I think, was 3 years or something. He was supposed to just be on Mixer, and Mixer was supposed to continue on. But earlier this year, after those deals were done, I guess Phil Spencer or somebody at Xbox was like, listen, we're sinking a lot of money into this platform and it's showing no growth. We could be sinking this money into the development of the Series X or game studios, which is where Xbox really needs to focus its efforts right now, because we all know that Microsoft isn't the best when it comes to first party IP or like exclusive games on the Xbox. Microsoft should be spending that money acquiring game development studios, or at the very least acquiring the rights to games so that they can be exclusive on Xbox and Windows 10, and not investing in this Mixer platform. That's what I assume Phil Spencer or the Xbox executive team or whoever's in charge of Xbox sat down and decided. They looked at the numbers and said, this money here could be better spent doing this over here. And that's why Mixer is unfortunately going away.
It's a super important point. And we're, people are blaming Satya Nadella, of course, for this. And typically, hey, he's a CEO. It's under his watch,
I'm sure he greenlit the idea.
I'm sure he approved of the decision. But ultimately, this is how anyone who runs a business knows this. I know Microsoft makes a lot of money. But when you run even the Xbox division, you're given a budget. And with that budget, you got to make magic happen. You got to invest in the right things, make stuff happen. And in return, you're supposed to show at the end of your quarter what you did for Microsoft. Did your division make money? And more importantly, what are you projecting the next quarter? That's just how this stuff works. Microsoft was losing money on Mixer. And what really did them in, you mentioned they got Ninja, they got Shroud, and those are big moves. And we started feeling a little bit
hang on,
rumbling. Yeah. This may be it. This just may be what's
They're taking
needed.
this seriously. Wow.
And then, the COVID pandemic happened. Gaming in general went up through the roof because so many people were home. This was sort of the opportunity, right? If there was going to be a make or break, you got Ninja now, you got a Shroud, you got Mixer, you got people at home, you got eyeballs in front of this stuff. And Mixer saw almost no improvements in engagements or viewers. It was 2%. Meanwhile, Twitch and all them were 40% and 50%. The numbers were just off the chart. That's just writing on the wall. If you can't make Mixer work right now, there's probably no way to do that. And from what we understand, this is just a simple thing. Xbox had a division. They have a budget, and they can be we can sink all this money into Mixer and keep sinking money into Mixer. Or we could take that money and maybe, buy more game studios and actually focus on gaming, the core thing that people want to do on Xbox and PC. That's a tough decision. I know some people like to think that well, it's Microsoft. They should be able to do both. But that's just not how budgets work. And I think if you're given a budget and you're just deciding where to put your money, your job is dependent on this, right? Spencer wants to be able to go back to Nadella and be like, here's what I did with Xbox. I bought these game studios and look at our game engagement went up through the roof. That's what he wants, right? It's hard to go to Nadella quarter after quarter being like, we still got Mixer. It's still not gaining any steam. We're losing money. And I have no good news about next quarter either. It doesn't look like it's going to get better. To go to your boss over and over again with those numbers, eventually your boss is going to be like, you're not killing that thing. You're keeping around and losing our company money, and you have no game plan to fix it or way out for it. Why are you in charge again of all this? Because that's just how business is, unfortunately. So, I don't think this was Nadella's decision. I think this was the Xbox division's decision. I think Nadella just probably signed off on it. Probably said, yeah, that's it's fine. We do that. I'm sure he could have overridden it if he thought it was super important, but I'm sure the numbers spoke for themselves. And like I said, it's not just them losing money. It was this idea that there was probably no route for them to get better. It was a brick wall. And the COVID pandemic literally proved that, unfortunately, which I guess segues nicely into the next story, which is about Microsoft stores. Microsoft stores have always been interesting. There was a big push of them. There's about 100 in the United States. It's fluctuated a little bit here and there. Some underperformed, all this kind of stuff. We did the big New York flagship store. I remember we covered that live. It was a big deal. They just opened the London one, which was 4 years in the making because Microsoft spent so much time, because it's all, they say in any kind of store, right? It's real estate, real estate, real estate. It's where you position the store to get it totally matters, right? And Microsoft made this conscious decision to always sort of put their stores next to an Apple store, which I thought was kind of funny. It was a bold decision, but it was a good decision. I think a lot of us actually wanted them to do. But since then, we have to be honest, the Microsoft stores never had a tremendous amount of foot traffic. Sure, some stores were busy. The one here in Boston actually always did have people in it. But I've walked into Microsoft stores where it's just a bunch of employees standing around and maybe 3 or 4 people in the store. Yeah. And meanwhile, you can look at the Apple store, it'll have like 150 people in there. Now, granted, a lot of those people will point this out in the Apple store. A lot of those people are just there because their thing isn't working and they can't figure it out.
That so or they're charging their iPhone, because that's the other thing. They're not even in there to be serviced. They've just plugged their iPhone in because their phone's on low battery.
Yeah, or their battery's broken, or it's grandpa with his iPhone 4 wants to get a new iPhone. Like that is like a lot of that what's going on. Whereas people who buy PCs, they can go to Best Buy and buy them everywhere else, stuff like that.
Has anyone hang on? Has anyone ever actually purchased a product from an Apple store? It is the worst experience if you're somebody who.
I don't know about that.
No, okay, so it's a pleasant experience, but if you're somebody who doesn't like small talk and just wants to buy the thing, there's so much. They want to ask you how your day is, what you do. Can I just have the thing? I just give me the thing.
Dude, you're 100% right. Yeah, they are very. I've ranted about this on a podcast before, and I feel mean saying it because they are kind of cultish, but like you could tell they both hire the right people and they school them to be these like super outgoing, always smiling, and you want that. I get it. It's not a bad thing, but I'm like Zach, where I just go, I just want to buy my iPhone. I want I always order online. I go and pick it up. I just want, here's my credit card. Give it to me. Thanks. Bye. All right. Do you need us to, you want us to open it up and put your SIM? No, it's fine. I got it. I'll figure it out. Don't worry. But yeah, that's the Apple store. But so back to the Microsoft store. So, I mean, they never had a tremendous amount of traffic. And you could argue that it kind of broke even, I think. I don't think it was doing terrible, but they definitely weren't doing what Apple was doing. And they could have sort of ridden that strategy for a while. Then the COVID pandemic happens, and you have to really think about this, especially what's going on in the United States right now. All the malls had to shut down, all retail shut down. So you have all these stores shut down. This affects Apple too. All these employees now are on furlough or getting, unemployment. It's a tough thing. But, if you're Microsoft and you own that store on Fifth Ave in New York City, or you're leasing in that mall, you technically still have to be paying your lease. And that's where a lot of this issue about bailouts and stuff like that comes into. And that's a temporary problem, you can argue. And I think Microsoft could have been like, we could, basically ride this out for a couple months. We can do that. But what's happening now is until there's a vaccine for this thing, retail is going to be a tough sell to a lot of people. And if Microsoft already just had like minimal foot traffic coming in and they reopen and it's even less than that, and they got to pay these leases, and now a lot of these stores are still shut down. Even Apple had to re-shut down, I think, like 40 stores because of Florida and Texas, and California too, because again, the pandemic's kind of coming back in a lot of those states. There's a potential here where retail won't recover, at least until there's a vaccine, which may not happen until the end of 2020. And that's being optimistic. We could be going well to 2021. That's a long time to be paying a lease on properties that you're losing a lot of money on. Now you combine that, and a lot of people in our audience would know about this, and they're already pointing it out. The future is online. I myself, and I don't know, Zach's probably the same way, I do like 80 to 90% of my shopping online. I bought my car online through a website. Like literally, I didn't have to talk to another human being. I was so happy about that. I buy, as much as Amazon has issues, I buy a lot through Amazon. I get Amazon deliveries probably 4 times a week. The only thing I go to stores for are food, alcohol, and occasionally I'll use Best Buy in the sense of I'll order online just so I can go to the store and pick it up. Again, I don't want to talk to anybody. Just like, here's my credit card. Thanks. Bye. All right. And that's really sort of how, for me, going to a mall right now is weird. And I don't mean because of the pandemic. I mean, I would go to a mall maybe once a year for like Christmas. And even then was almost instant regret. So I think there's this general change of shopping behavior. A lot of people, and you and I are intimately familiar with this because Windows Central is a key factor in online shopping. We, make money through affiliate linking. If we talk about a laptop and we're like, hey, you want to buy it, you click the link to Amazon or Microsoft and you buy that thing, we get a little piece of it because we sent the traffic there. I think that's fair. So we make a lot of money on this stuff. And I buy all my stuff like online like that. And I think a lot of people are switching to that, and physical stores sort of make less sense. That's not to say they didn't have value though, right? I love the Microsoft stores. First of all, the staff was great all the time. They were just fun to talk to. The big thing a lot of people liked about them, if you had a problem with your Surface, you could just bring it in. They did very good warranty swaps. I brought in stuff. I haven't had to do it in years, thankfully, but I remember bringing the Surface Pro. I just bought it. Surface Pro 4 had a dead pixel. And I was like, I know I'm like nitpicking here because I can't unsee it. And you're like, not a problem. They took it to the back, just brought me out a brand new one. There you go. We opened it up to check it. You
won't get that online. Microsoft support online, and support in online and on every company is a lot more stricter because they have to.
It's a different company. Yeah, it's basically a different company.
Like you won't have that luck. Like if, for example, say, like, do you remember my HP Elite X3? I received a unit that didn't have the oleophobic coating on it. It was only up like a third of the screen, which meant for most of it, it looked gross, and the top half looked fine. And HP would not fix that. That is a flaw in the hardware. I have a faulty unit, but HP support wouldn't fix it because they were like, "But the phone works. You can use it, right?" And I'm like, "Yes." Then there's no problem. Like, but if HP had a store I could walk into, I could show someone that, and they'd say, "Oh, that's terrible. Here's a new one." It's straight away, right? And that's, unfortunately, you're not going to get that through online support.
And that's why people like Apple stores.
Yes.
If you have a problem with your iPhone, the battery's going, the screen is cracked.
Right.
Yeah, you'll pay for it, but you can bring it to them. They will fix it, and you will get a quality device back. That's why people like, they talk about Apple having that kind of complete ecosystem, and they really do take care of you.
It's also great as well. Sometimes you'll get in Apple, and I think this happened to some Microsoft stores as well. If your old device, say a Surface Pro 4, is having an issue and it's still under warranty, or you have extended warranty care and stuff, you can bring it into a store, and if they don't have any Surface Pros 4s in stock, they'll just give you the latest version. Like, we don't have any Pro 4s, but here's a Pro 7. Have fun with that. It's like, yes, free upgrade.
Yeah. So that stuff is hard to replace, and as much as I understand the business decision here, and we should say a lot of the employees luckily aren't being laid off. They're going to be given new positions because what's happening is and I'm already kind of familiar with this. My best friend does IT for a private school, and he works with the Microsoft Store locally. And by that, I mean, there's basically a person he's assigned who is there for him. If he has a question about a new product, he wants to try something, he contacts this person. Sometimes they bring him new hardware. They'll send it to him. He gets discounts. He gets tech support. They want a demo of, say, whiteboard. They'll come to the school and give the demo to the IT people and the teachers. That infrastructure is still going to continue. And I think Microsoft, between the COVID thing, the changes in retail shopping and customers, and this idea of direct B2B support, business to business support, I think is a smarter strategy with not very much overhead. We dealt with this in our parent company, Future, who, we all work remotely, but Future Publishing, our larger company, does have physical offices. They have one in Midtown Manhattan by Rockefeller Center. They have one in London? They have offices there?
Yes, yeah. They have London, in Bath. They've got offices all over the place. Yeah,
and so with the COVID pandemic, those had to shut down. And then a lot of these people in the company were like, do we even need to have that space, which must cost millions of dollars? So you are seeing this general rethinking of how things should operate. So, if Microsoft can continue doing that, I think that's a good thing. But I'm still sad because, as I said, returns, product support, even they had those little camps. If you bought a new device, they would teach you how to use it. They had little school sessions. They had gaming stuff of Minecraft. They had hacking stuff as well, schools where kids can come in to learn about STEM, engineering, and hacking. it was not just a store where you bought stuff. There was kind of a community aspect to it, but
Yeah.
they tried. I mean, I don't know what else they could have done.
It is sad because it is another consumer-facing element of Microsoft that is going
Right.
away, which is funny because it's all of the consumer stuff that Microsoft kills seemingly is, it's all consumer stuff, and it is unfortunate. And not all, most of the stores are closing down, but their flagship stores are sticking around, not as stores but as experience centers. So people will be able to see the Microsoft logo in the retail, in the flagship areas. I think one's in New York, one's in London. I think there's one in Sydney as well. And at least the one in London is prominently placed on Regent Street, which is a huge, loads of people go through there every day. So people will still be able to see the Microsoft logo and will still be able to see the latest Surface products and stuff, but you won't be able to buy them in store. Microsoft is pulling stock from these places, so you won't be able to walk in. Can I buy that? Yes, and they give it to you, and you walk out. You'll be able to go in, check it out, and say, "I'd like to buy this," and the person there will be able to say, "Hey, you can go online to microsoftstore.com and you can buy that right now, and it will be delivered in 3 to 5 working days or whatever." Which is that takes away the convenience of it, but at least in the case of the flagship locations, it doesn't remove Microsoft from the consumer mindset. But everywhere else, in the smaller towns and stuff, where they are in the US primarily, I don't think there's any small ones elsewhere in the world, but in the US, those stores are actually just going away. And so people will not see the Microsoft logo. They won't be able to walk in and experience Surface products and Xbox and stuff, which is unfortunate. And again, it is another consumer-facing thing that's disappearing.
Yeah, I can imagine that's going to impact their bottom line significantly in a good way. Because like if Microsoft shut down, during this pandemic, the stores have been shut down already, and they didn't see material impact on business. That is, people were still buying Surfaces.
Right.
It does raise the question of so what's the huge benefit here besides just being the right thing and nice customer-facing solution? But in terms of supply, if you think about it, we joke around all the time about how we kind of know new Surface is coming out because the old Surface suddenly gets massively discounted, right? And by then it's an open secret. But this idea of massively discounting old products, it's nice, but it's not a problem that companies want to have. Ideally, they don't have much leftover stock.
Yeah, they sold it all at full price. Yeah.
Yeah, and they sold it all at full price, and they have a little remaining that they can sell at cheaper and take a little bit of a loss or something. And I imagine having 100 stores, you got to send all your Surface Book 3s there, all your Surface laptops, all your Surface Pros, all the various SKUs and configurations to those stores. They all got to be back there. And they keep stock so that you can walk in and buy it that day. So they got to keep enough coming in and coming out. And you keep enough of that around, and you're doing online direct sales through your direct channels. There comes a thing, when the Surface Pro 8 comes out, there's going to be a lot of Surface Pro 7s in stores that maybe didn't sell. And so one way to tightly control that supply chain is you just don't have to stack up physical stores. You just sell directly. You can go more to this idea of build to order kind of thing, which is what Microsoft and any company would actually want. And no company wants a lot of leftover overstock. That's the biggest risk. That's what killed, the original Surface, right? The Surface RT.
The $900 million write-down.
Yeah,
it's $900 million of stock that we haven't sold.
Yeah. And so that's the thing that's always that they got to make sure you're not sitting on a lot of inventory. One way not to do that is not to have to stock physical stores.
Yeah.
So it's a bummer. I'm sad about it. Not surprised. I think they gave a good effort. Even if you wanted this to work out for them, I'm not sure what else they could have done. The fact is retail in general is a bloodbath right now. Chuck E. Cheese is filing for bankruptcy. If you don't know what Chuck E. Cheese is, it's a famous chain here in the U.S. But there's a lot of companies struggling, not to mention independents too. So I think it's a perfect storm that's sort of that's very unfortunate. But anyway, let's go into brighter news. Actually, it's not. I did quickly write an editorial this week about how I even brought up the question, is Windows 10 quality control getting worse? And I know this is, a lot of people listening to this podcast duh, I've been saying that for years. I know Barnacules Nerdgasm, he's been making this point for about 5 years, I think now, that the idea of Microsoft replacing its Q&A team and going to telemetry only in the Insider program, the pieces sound good there, but it hasn't really paid off in being Windows being more stable and reliable. And I sat in the sideline for a long time for this because although I heard other people's experiences, which is important, it's anecdotal. And that was right up until I had my own anecdotal experience. And I've never really had issues with Windows 10 instability. And I run a lot of hardware, obviously. I'm always on new laptops. Some of them are ones I keep going back to. My Pro X that's my main device. This Envy Tower I'm using is my main device. So these are running old Windows, getting the updates just like a regular consumer device, whereas the new XP is 15, it's new out of box, right? But even I've noticed way more bugs lately and issues with Windows 10. I mentioned on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, my Envy Tower here got a green screen of death and just went to a reset loop, and I had to reinstall Windows. People are like, yeah, well, that's what you get for being on release preview. I'm like, really? Release preview?
It's release preview. It should be fine.
Release preview is a retail build of Windows.
Yes.
It's what's running on your machine. You just get early access to inbox apps like Mail and Skype, and sometimes you get a driver update or two. Only a week or two before everybody else gets it. It's the final stage. This isn't testing anymore. I mean, it is, but it's not like beta testing. It's supposed to be stable. At the very least, it's not supposed to be causing reset loops. And I know, and the thing is, it's not even related to the Insider program. I was told that it seems to have been a problem between HP and Microsoft in general. It had nothing to do with the Insider program. But that was a catastrophic thing. Now, reinstalling Windows and getting my system back because of the cloud wasn't terrible, but obviously that ruined my night. Surface Pro X this week got a firmware update. Cool. Downloads, installs. Well, it tells you to restart, and you restart, and then you go back to settings, and it says you need to restart to install. and it just keeps saying that. And so I'm not even sure if it actually did install or but like, why is that bug kind of happening still in 2020 on a Surface Pro X? I mentioned my Surface Book 3. There's still issues with the disconnect between popping the display off every once in a while. I get an error message. I thought it was because I broke it, but it turned out other people have this problem too. There's also this issue where you would separate the tablet while if you were playing audio, saying a YouTube video, and you separated the tablet, the speakers would crackle for a few seconds. Like, there just seemed to be, and then I brought up Nightlight. I love Nightlight because I work late at night. I'm always staring at screens. I like reducing the UV. And it never works for me anymore. It used to. It used to be very reliable. But now it's just like, I'll be like 12 o'clock at night and I'll turn on my computer. It's supposed to be on. It says it's on and it's not on. So I have to toggle the switch, which is super confusing. It gets dim and then goes back up again. And sometimes I've been like actually using it. And like I remember at midnight, it just turned off. It's like in the middle of doing something. I'm like, really? I'm like staring at a price. Like, why am I still? So I had to go back to FLux, which if FLux always works well. So I don't know. This is just another anecdotal tale for me. And that's all there is. But even I'm noticing what I think are more bugs than usual. So
it's almost embarrassing, especially when it comes to the Surface hardware, because when 2004 launched, the latest version of Windows 10, it wasn't available in any Surface products, at least any of the modern Surface products at launch. It took them a few weeks before that started rolling out on Surface devices, and even some laptops don't even have it. So someone's in our chat saying my Surface Laptop 3 still can't get version 2004, which is insane. Imagine if Apple released the latest version of Mac OS. I'm like, oh, by the way, it's only available on the latest Macs. It'll be coming to the older Macs in a few weeks. Or the vice the other way around. It only works on all of our Macs up till 2016, but 2017, 2018, and up to 2020,
right.
It's not working yet. It'll be there soon. That would blow the internet's mind. Same with the iPhone. Oh, sorry, it doesn't work on the iPhone 11. It works on everything else though. The iPhone 11 will have it soon. It just wouldn't happen. And don't get me wrong, Apple does control the stack way more than Microsoft does, but Microsoft still controls the hardware and the software to a certain degree, and the Surface products should be the first devices that get it on day one, in my opinion. Everything else can wait. I mean, I know everything else is most of the market, but you avoid bad headlines just by making the Surface products compatible with the latest version of Windows. Windows has a bad rap of being buggy, and it not being supported on Microsoft's own hardware plays into that. Even if Microsoft is holding it back just in case, you should just test this. Test it internally. make sure it works before you announce a release date, and then just release it when it's ready to go. You shouldn't be holding this back. It is ridiculous, and I do wonder rather whether we will see some changes next year with Windows 10 and the development. Now that Panos is in charge again, he's a very detail orientated guy. He's very UX focused. He wants the best possible experience. He's essentially an Apple guy. He should be working at Apple, but he's here on Windows, which should be good news for us. He might be able to apply the necessary work to make sure Windows does complement the hardware that it ships on, because Surface, the hardware is amazing. What lets Surface down is Windows. I've said this since the beginning, especially for tablets. The Surface Pro is a tablet more than anything else, and Windows sucks on tablets. So I think we're going to start seeing some improvements there as well. Like whether we'll see 2 updates next year or just one major one, like it remains to be seen. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we see a shake up in the schedules for updates next year. We might not get one until fall. So we'll get 20H2 this year, and then we might not get another one until fall next year. I think that's a very likely possibility. Not that I've heard anything, but just based on how Windows is looking right now, and now that Panos is in charge, I think he might want to make the next version quite a big release, and taking more time to do that is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a tough problem. And like I said in the article, there's a billion Windows PCs out there or devices, some are Xbox, of course, but Apple doesn't have this problem. Apple makes the hardware. They're now making the processors too. They do the software. They can do way more control and all this stuff. And they don't have to answer to anyone. They don't need to be compatible. They don't even need to worry about enterprise because no one in enterprise uses them. And so they can just do their own thing, lock down, and be as authoritarian as they want internally to make this stuff stable. Microsoft needs to build an operating system that can run on a billion different devices, all with different configurations of hardware, some 10 years old, some brand spanking new. I mean, it's actually amazing. It's as good as it is, I think, because just the sheer numbers of variations. I mean, and everybody who knows Windows knows this, because if you have an issue on your laptop, look at this thing, it's busted. And you could have a friend that has the exact same laptop, nearly the same setup, and it's fine for me. You and I and our team do it all the time.
Yeah.
Somebody like Edge just did
Jez,
that.
Jez is a great. Jez has issues with Windows all the time, and then I'll go in and check the thing he's having an issue with, and it's working fine for me. And I'm like, so is there a bug, or is it just an issue specific to your setup? Because you've got to remember, all the different configurations. Microsoft needs to figure out what is a bug and what is the fault of the user, or what is the fault of the hardware configuration on the OEM's behalf. Microsoft can't fix everything because not everything is Microsoft's fault. Universal OS bugs are Microsoft's doing. Bugs specific to certain devices from third-party OEMs should be... I guess Microsoft has to work with the OEMs to get those fixed, or at the very least the OEM has to change something in their hardware to fix that. But then when it's just random weird stuff, that isn't a bug normally, but just for this one specific device in this one specific part of the world is having this issue. What does Microsoft do there? Do they build a patch to fix that one guy, or that one PC, or does that one PC just have to suffer with the bug? How do they figure out which is a bug to fix, which is a bug that isn't a bug, and everything in between?
Yeah, so I'm not really sure what can be done to fix it. I just hope they do. Panos, I imagine working for Panos must be both satisfying but also intense, as we like to say about it, in the sense that, I imagine he has very high standards, and if they're not met, he's gonna I could see him losing his cool and just immediately firing people. I could see him, because I feel like he's one of those people who are just this is the way it's going to be done.
Yeah.
And
I imagine he says things like, I want it like this. And then someone says, sir, that's impossible. He goes, make it possible. It's okay.
I can't believe you made that happen. And that's why you're fired. Right. I can kind of see that happening. So maybe that will have an important impact. We also have to, Windows 10X technically is a clean slate.
Right.
It's a simpler operating system. It's meant to be simpler. It's built on newer concepts and OS architectures that are not legacy. They don't have to worry about business as much, because Microsoft does, unfortunately, have to worry about enterprise. For as much as credit as Apple gets, Apple is still, in 2020, you can look it up, less than 10% of the PC market.
Right.
More importantly, it's flat.
Yeah.
Like if you can go back 10 years and watch the Mac market for laptops and PCs, it's flat. It's like 8 or 9%, and they're not getting better. If anything, they've gone down because of iPad. But as far as Apple's so good, they have a tiny sliver of the entire market.
Yeah, and I think having a smaller market share does make it easier to be bold when it comes to changes.
Sure.
We'll get into this now. WWDC happened this week,
Yes.
and it was a big Apple's yearly developer conference. It was a virtual event, just like Microsoft's Build conference earlier this year. And if I'm honest, I think Apple did it a bit better, if only because it was more entertaining for a general audience. I think Apple knows that not just developers watch WWDC, but influencers and just people who are interested in tech watch WWDC as well. So their day one keynote is very consumer friendly in the sense that there's lots of like panning shots of Apple's like headquarters and stuff, lots of funky music and like humor, and it's fast paced. Like we're in and out. It's not like we're gonna write some code on stage for 20 minutes like Microsoft is great at doing. So they did WWDC. They announced new versions of iOS, watchOS, tvOS, and macOS, and I think something else that I'm missing. But the big ones we sort of want to focus on is really macOS, because macOS has a direct, Windows is the competitor there. And I think on Twitter I've seen this week a lot of comparisons between how Apple does macOS and how Microsoft does Windows, especially when it comes to announcements and features and whatnot. And I think the general consensus here is that Apple just knock it out of the park when it comes to hyping up macOS. And not in that, but redesigning macOS. Apple has delivered with this version of macOS, I think called Big Sur, which is a mountain somewhere, I believe. They have redesigned almost everything.
I don't know if it's a mountain.
Is it mountains?
It's definitely a town.
Oh, is it town?
It's a town.
Oh, okay,
yeah, it's a town in California.
Because they've been based on mountains as of recently, but I guess they've changed that. Anyway, yeah, so macOS 11 is also, they've gone from macOS 10 since 2001 to macOS 11 because of this big design change. It's like it looks new and fresh, and the design, some people don't like the design, some people did like the design. That's not the point. The point is Apple was able to deliver a complete overhaul of the operating system with it still remaining familiar. Like they've changed a lot of icons, they've changed the UI of stuff, but everything still remains in place more or less. So they've added some new features like a control center. But it's still macOS. You still, as a macOS user, would know how to use it. Microsoft has been promising the same thing with Windows 10 for a long time, and it hasn't happened yet, which it's unfortunate because like Microsoft promises this, and I think Microsoft itself knows that we've promised a lot of these redesigns and none of them have come to light. Like the Fluent Design stuff from 2017, which was the big sort of when they announced Fluent Design, like, hey, here's what Windows is going to look like. This is a journey. It will take time, but it's going to happen. We're 3 to 4 years later now, and none of that has taken place. A very little of it has been applied to the Windows shell. Most inbox apps are still inconsistent with their application of Fluent Design. That's the other thing with macOS and Apple. They have a design language and they apply it to everything, more or less consistency. There's a few odd bits here and there, but for them, it's 99 times better than what Windows has done with Fluent Design. With Fluent Design for Windows in the shell and in inbox app, it's all over the place because there's so many different teams working on the overall product that is Windows that they all have different applications and different ideas for how that should work. There's no strict guideline for Fluent Design, whereas on the Apple side, it's like, right, every sidebar should look like this. Every title bar should look like this. Every button here should look like that. And it just creates a much more consistent UX on macOS, whereas Windows feels janky and inconsistent and just not as well thought out. And I really, really hope, again, Panel's now being in charge, I hope this is his number one priority, is to fix that, to make Windows look and feel beautiful. Which is weird. You don't call software beautiful, but you get the idea. Like, it should look good. It should make you feel happy to use, I guess. Like you shouldn't feel like, oh, that's ugly or that's not. Have you seen the People app in Windows 10? I open up the People app, not my People, that thing's dead. The actual People app in Windows 10, it looks like a pre-release program that was never finished, especially in dark mode. In dark mode, it looks even worse. How does that ship in Windows 10 to 1 billion users? I would never know. Apple would never be seen shipping something like that. They'd rather close down and sell off the iPhone to Google before that happens on macOS, It is insane that Microsoft lets stuff like that happen on Windows. And a lot of people at Microsoft just don't care. They don't think it's important. They think, we've got to be focused on the cloud. We've got to be focused on Teams. We've got to be focused on Office. A lot of people at Microsoft just don't care that this is the state of Windows. I tweeted this week that, I said I'm kind of jealous that Apple was able to deliver a huge redesign of macOS in 1 year, whereas we're waiting however many years for Microsoft to do it, and they're still nowhere near. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, a few people sort of mentioned to me that yeah, a lot of people at Microsoft saw that and just don't care. It's like, how do you not care? You should be. I'm getting into a rant. I don't want to. I'm going to stop.
They do. I think Microsoft, getting back to the people thing, they do need a refresh on the inbox apps. The experiences there would be kind of nice. I like MSN News. I use it every day. And it's been getting actually regular updates, especially for features. But the whole like hard square thing is, going away, right? We're getting to rounded corners and new designs, stuff like that. Yeah, eventually. But it'd be nice to start with those apps, right? That they get just more modern. I don't know.
Yeah, the other thing is Windows just feels stagnant because it hasn't changed much in the 5 years it's been on shelves and stuff. There have been updates and some things have changed here and there, but for the most part, Windows 10 still looks like Windows 10. And while that's fine, we do need to keep things fresh and stuff. And Windows just doesn't feel fresh. I think one very easy thing Microsoft could do, which takes almost no effort to do, is once a year, with every H1 release or whatever, just change the default wallpaper. Mac does this every year, and I'm telling you,
good points.
It makes a difference. It really, really does. Like Mac, every new release of Mac OS isn't a huge on the UI stuff. Like apart from this one that's coming later this year, like the last few releases of Mac OS have more or less been the same with a few new features here and there. But they changed the wallpaper, and it just gives the entire thing a fresh feeling. Microsoft should just start with changing the wallpapers, and they don't even do that. They just can't be bothered. That's what really grinds my gears when it comes to Windows.
And they have good design teams, right? They put out wallpaper packs and everything like that.
Yeah.
Like, I know part of it's because that laser Windows logo one, I think they spent a lot of money on to have it created. There's a video that showed how. So I feel like they're like, well, we paid a ton of money to have that thing made. That should be the default Windows wallpaper. But yeah, you're right. Just that small thing of changing the wallpaper will let you know, hey, you're on an updated version. And they can't do it like if you set your own wallpaper, you just did an OS upgrade. Like, you don't want to do that. Although you can solve that with out-of-box experiences, where hey, you want to see our new wallpaper? Apply? No, keep my old. Yeah. It's not rocket science, but
yeah, even the setup experience of Windows is so like, it isn't consumer friendly. Like Windows 8 very much so was. Like you'd set up a Windows 8 PC for the first time. It'd say, name your PC, and you'd name it your PC. Choose your accent color. Sign in with your Microsoft account. Windows 10 it's just agree language, agree to terms and conditions, Wi-Fi, agree to all of these telemetry things. You're good to go. You don't get an option to name your PC. You don't get an option to change anything on the customization side. No theme, no wallpaper, no nothing. Like Windows 10 is very clinical when it comes to being an operating system, whereas Mac OS and even older versions of Windows were a lot more consumer, or at least like just normal, like human. They were a lot more human. They were a lot more welcoming as just a normal person, whereas it does feel like Windows 10 is specifically catered to enterprises, which I get that. Microsoft's number one customer are enterprises. But there's also a hell of a lot of people who use Windows who aren't part of enterprises and just use Windows because that's what they know. They don't necessarily love it, but they still use it. They still at least make it an enjoyable experience for those people.
Definitely. Any thoughts on ARM? I didn't even get to go over the news with Apple this week, so I'm actually kind of behind on this stuff. But from what I understand, Mac OS is going to run on ARM.
Yes, so
can run iPad apps.
Right. So Apple announced that Mac OS will be moving to Apple Silicon. That's the phrase that they use. Not once did they mention ARM in the keynote. They just said Apple Silicon, which we all know is based on ARM. But I think Apple just are distancing themselves from the ARM brand and just specifically want to advertise these as Apple chips, which is fine. It makes sense. So these Apple Silicon chips will likely be based on the chips that run in the iPhone and iPad. In fact, the developer kit that they've released is running an A12Z, which is the same processor that you can find in the latest iPad Pro. Apple said that they will be doing this transition in the next 2 years. So similar to when they announced the PowerPC to Intel transition, they said within the next 2 years, our entire Mac lineup will move from PowerPC to Intel-based stuff. And I assume the same will happen here. They've said later this year we'll ship the first ARM Macs, although they've still got Intel Macs coming as well. And I assume the Intel Macs will survive for a long time after, like even after 2 years. I think if you buy an Intel Mac today, you'll be able to use that for at least a decade, I imagine. I don't think Apple are going to cut off support that quickly. But the big deal here is that Apple are promising huge performance gains for macOS, or a better battery life, because they are moving to ARM. Everything that Intel was bad at, Apple is about to solve with moving to Apple Silicon. And not only that, they've also announced Rosetta 2, which is the translation software they use to convert x86 apps to ARM, similar to what Windows 10 on ARM does, except better, according to Apple, in the sense that it will do the translation at install rather than on run. So I don't know what it means from a technical level, but I think that means the OS will do its best to sort of translate the app so that when you run it after it's installed, it's not actually running an emulator in the background. It's technically running natively. Again, I'm not a developer. I don't know how that works. But since Apple is moving all to ARM anyway, within 2 years, most developers will have to update their apps for ARM anyway, because it's not like it's going to be an option between Intel or ARM. It's going to be, right, we're moving everything to ARM. In 10 years' time, everything will be ARM. So you have to be building your apps for ARM now, whereas Windows doesn't have that luxury, right? Which is why we haven't seen the adoption of a native ARM apps on Windows 10, because Intel and AMD are sticking around and will forever be the dominant platform. So developers just don't see the reason to do it. Whereas on Mac OS, developers aren't going to have the choice. We're moving to Apple Silicon. We're moving to ARM. Your apps have to support this. And if they don't, they're going to be left behind. So I think this is going to work for Apple, and it's just another way Apple is doing something better than Microsoft that just annoys me.
Yep, it's tough. I'm excited about obviously ARM and seeing Macs on it. I'm not thrilled with. I think it's neat you can run iPad apps on it. Like, cool.
I think what they're doing there is they're testing it now so that they can do it in the reverse, in the sense that the iPad Pro will eventually be able to run Mac OS professional grade apps like Final Cut.
And eventually they just have one system for running apps that work across both devices.
So Apple is realizing the universal app platform that Microsoft has only dreamed of.
Yes. Yeah. But hey, Macs are still, as we pointed out, less than 10% of the market share. So, and they haven't had. If you look at the last few quarters of Mac sales, they've been going down, not up.
I do wonder if now that Apple is moving to its own chips, that they could possibly do a cheaper Mac, like a $500 Mac, because they've never really done a cheap MacBook like the laptop form. If they did, I think that would be successful, like to a certain degree. I don't think it's going to catapult Apple into being the most dominant desktop OS, but Apple, if they wanted to, they could try and take that. If they want, they could play aggressive. They could say, "Here's a $300 MacBook. Here's a $500 MacBook. Here's a $700 MacBook," and here's a tower PC. Here's an all-in-one. Just cheaper versions of the Macs they've already got. I think a lot of people would eat that up, and that could be a real threat to Microsoft in the future. Just like how the iPhone came along, and everybody at first laughed at the iPhone. That's never going to be a serious competitor in the market. Look at us today. The iPhone is number 2 technically market share wise, but number 1 when it comes to brand recognition and being the device most people want to use. And could Apple do that with the Mac? I think they could if they really wanted to, but I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yep, it should be an exciting time. It's always moving targets here. So unfortunately this podcast was very negative.
Yeah, but Microsoft sometimes it's not good to just always talk about the good stuff that Microsoft does, because Microsoft does bad stuff, and it would be wrong of us to try and pretend those bad things don't happen, I think.
It's true. But I think that about wraps it up. Just a quick shout out. I did do a review on Android Central this week for a Panasonic Toughbook.
Already jumping ship from Windows Central, eh?
Yeah, right. No, so Panasonic, I just enjoy their stuff tremendously, because I just find, like, I love covering obviously high-end consumer tech, right? It's exciting stuff, but how that translates into regular people who go to work every day and maybe save your lives, or your life, I think it's super fascinating. And that's what Panasonic does. They basically take existing hardware and they ruggedize it, make it for, fire, EMT, police, military, government, construction, engineers, scientists. And so they released their new Android tablet this week. And I thought it was interesting for a few reasons. I know a lot of people here don't play with Android, but Android on a tablet makes that point that Zach brought up earlier, which is that Windows isn't great on a tablet. Now, there are rugged tablets. Dell has one, and Asus this week. Was it Asus or was it Acer? I always mix those two.
You always have this problem.
Yes, one of them had a lot of software or hardware announcements this week, but they are now making ruggedized devices, and one of those is a tablet that runs Windows. So that's already out there, and Panasonic decided to go with Android. And the reason they did it, it's literally because Windows CE is no longer a thing. And so Android a few years ago was security nightmare. It's better now. And they're saying it's good enough to be used in enterprise. We made it secure. We're going to do security patches, optional OS updates that can be done. So this 10-inch tablet is just really cool. It's super rugged, IP65. It can detect if you're outside and it's raining. Since it has a touch screen, it can tell the difference between your finger touches and raindrops coming down, which is kind of crazy. That, again, they had to solve for that. But go check it out. It's just a fun thing. The only reason I think it's interesting because someday, hopefully, you won't be pulled over by the police, but police, fire, EMT, someone in a hospital, or even if you work in construction, or you may use one of these devices, and they're just fun to use. It has LTE, dual LTE on there, and super GPS. It's just it's a cool doomsday device. I'll say that. So go check that out. That's the Panasonic Toughbook A3. You can see that Android Central. Other than that, coming up XPS 15 review. I do have the new HP Envy X360 running Ryzen, which just got in. That's reviews coming out soon. That's a fun laptop. I can already tell you, spoiler alert, HP Envy X360 with AMD Ryzen 4000 for $800 is going to be the best $800 you can spend on a laptop. It's convertible, touchscreen, supports inking, Microsoft Protocol 2.0. The Ryzen processor is very good in it. Plus, you get Ryzen Radeon graphics. Really outstanding device that has even pretty good audio on it too. So, but look for that full review soon. Zach, you have anything exciting coming out that you want to plug?
I'm planning to do a little bit more video content in the coming weeks. This week we published a Power Toys video, which has done very well, 100k views. Lots of interest in Power Toys apparently, which is a super cool program which you should definitely download. And also we did the Surface Go 2 video review, which finally went live. We did technically upload it last week, but I had to pull it because there was an issue with the render. But it's up this week, and yeah, that's all good. So next week, I'm hopefully going to do another Surface Duo emulator review, video walkthrough, but instead of looking at the OS, just talk about the actual apps. We did an article on it a couple of weeks back, but I'm just going to do a sort of video version of that as well. I should also mention, those of you listening on Mixer, since Mixer is closing down, we know it's closing down in July, but just to make my life easier, this is going to be the last stream we do on Mixer. So if you are listening on Mixer, go to youtube.com/Windows Central. That's where we record these live on Fridays, and that's where it will be exclusively from now on because we're not moving to Facebook Gaming.
Yeah, exactly. Unless they want to pay us.
Unless they want to pay us, please.
But anyway, I think that about wraps it up. We'll be doing some Q&A now with the audience. So if you want to start getting your questions ready, we'll spend some time to try to answer those. Other than that, though, you can find us on Twitter. Running joke there. Follow me at Daniel_Rubino, even though I can't.
I hope you get that back. That's going to be annoying if you don't get that back.
Yeah, I'm still locked out of my account a week later. Twitter has not even responded to my email. I put an article up on Windows Central just to complain about it. Maybe it'll get their attention, although at this point I'm thinking no. I even had someone at Twitter who handles kind of stuff like this say, I'll try to elevate your ticket. And then
Can't you just fix it?
I know. Can you just go to my account and just fix it? So that's unfortunate. If anyone at Twitter's listening, contact me. You can email me at daniel@windowscentral.com. It's pretty easy. But we'll see. You can follow Zach, though, at ZACBOWDEN, and he'll be happy to respond back to you. Other than that, you can catch us every Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, only on youtube.com/Windows Central. You can join our live video broadcast as well as the chat room, which is always a lot of fun. And as we bid adieu to Mixer, RIP. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care, everybody.
Fantastic. So yes, question time. We will hang around for 10 to 15 minutes to answer your questions. I've seen lots of questions about Surface Duo. I have no real updates for you. I am hearing movement on Duo will begin or start happening in July. I don't know if that's publicly or if, just for the media and stuff, just to get things ready. I don't know, honestly. But July, August, September time is when we're hearing Duo will be starting to launch. So we're getting close. We are getting close. Someone asked about carriers. Since the Microsoft store is closing down, where will they sell the Duo? Well, Microsoft will sell it unlocked online. You'll be able to buy it from MicrosoftStore.com. But I am hearing that a carrier will be carrying the Surface Duo. I don't know if it'll be at launch or if it'll be later in the year or whatever. But I think possibly AT&T might carry it. But again,
makes sense.
That's
I mean,
not...
AT&T was
yeah.
I was gonna say AT&T has been a big partner of Microsoft for a long time. Lord knows they launched Windows Phone stuff big time.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Why don't we have New Edge on Xbox? Do you know if there are plans to bring it to Xbox? Would be nice to be able to pin a Windows progressive app. Yeah. So every time we've asked Microsoft about that, they have said we have nothing to share. They told us at one point that it would come eventually, but we've had no updates, and since then we have nothing to share. So
it's an architecture issue, right?
Yeah, so it's a Win32.
It's a Win32.
Program. Yeah, and Xbox doesn't run Win32. But with Windows Core, technically it could. But whether or not Series X is a Windows Core product or if it's using Xbox's own weird OS, which is what the One runs, remains to be seen. Maybe we'll see it launch with the Series X. Maybe we won't. But we'll have to see.
I have the original Surface Go. Is a Surface Go 2 a must-have upgrade with the M3 chip? This answer comes down to a simple metric, which is how often do you use Surface Go? If you're on that device 4 to 6 hours a day, it's the first thing you turn on when you wake up or close to it, and you're using it all the time and you just adore it, absolutely. The Go 2 will change your life. The thinner bezels are great. The processor is a big difference, and the battery life is still pretty good on it. So it's like, if you only use it on occasion, once or twice a week, maybe an hour or two here, it's a little harder to justify. Then again, it's not super expensive, compared to buying a laptop. Plus, you can reuse your keyboard with it and a pen. You don't need to buy those again. So, it may be worth considering. But that's usually how I evaluate stuff. If you consider that product your bread and butter, and you love it, and you use it all the time, then if you have the cash, I would try to go out and get the new one.
Does the Xbox Series X include a disk drive? Any speculation on Series S including a disk drive? So Series X does have a disk drive. Series S is likely not going to have one. I think they've prototyped versions with and without internally for the Lockhart, which is Series S. But I think the shipping model won't have it, only because it's designed to be cheaper and throw out anything unnecessary. If you're trying to get the lowest possible price, I think maybe they'll do both. Maybe they'll do one with a disc and one without a disc, like the PS5. But I think one without a disc drive will definitely be an option for consumers.
Why did Microsoft choose Facebook? One of the most toxic names. I mean, so we have an article up on this. Just Corden wrote it, explaining it. There was the idea of just dumping all your streamers and just being like, sorry, we're done, we're closed. Figured out where to go is kind of a poor exit strategy. I think this is the least they could have done. Instead of giving it to Twitch directly or even Google, they were like, well, Facebook streaming, gaming is becoming a big thing. That's probably our best chance to support a third party or another company. I think it's actually a good decision, as much as I don't like Facebook. But it's not like Twitch is that amazing, so I don't know, but that's fine.
Someone's asking about do you feel Apple's move to ARM will help or hurt Windows? I don't think it affects Windows, because even if Apple moves entirely to ARM, no Mac OS programs run on Windows anyway, so it's not like those developers would choose Mac and leave the Windows version behind. But in regards to just on the ARM architecture, the Mac OS stuff will win, because Apple's chips are just so far ahead of Qualcomm in every department, more or less. Like, I think the iPad Pro right now is outputting performance that can rival an Intel i5, let alone, a Qualcomm processor. And that's only going to get better. If Apple is forecasting 2 years for the transition period, that means by the end of 2 years, they're going to have ARM chips in their Mac Pro line, that's some serious power if they can actually pull that off. So we'll have to wait and see.
Good question. Have you guys ever tried to get Panos or Ralph Grain to agree to be interviewed on the podcast? Um, I have made offers to Microsoft before. I haven't done it recently. I should try again. Um, you usually get we're not the Verge,
Yeah,
so
it's not
we
worth
don't
their
get,
time, unfortunately.
yeah. So,
No,
but
don't get me wrong. I'm sure they would love to talk to us because we're sort of enthusiasts and fans. We sort of get it. But unfortunately, when it comes to PR stuff like that, they don't get to decide who they talk to. It's the PR teams around them that say, right, you're going to
right.
this website or that website because they have the viewership, they have, whatever, they have the eyes.
Yeah. So, but if Microsoft's listening and they'd like to help set that up, you know where to find me. But we'll ask around. I mean, we've had access with, I see Ralph and Panos at these events all the time, talk to them and get to engage with them, which is fun. But yeah, hopefully we can maybe do something like that in the future.
Might be easier as well since everyone's at home.
Yeah.
Do you really believe Windows will create a visual revolution? I assume you mean will Windows be getting a visual redesign? If it wasn't for Panos being in charge of Windows and Ralph Green, I think it is Growing Green, being in charge of Windows design, I would have no hope for that. I would say that is never coming. But since they are where they are, perhaps I'm giving them 2 years to deliver something significant. They're on notice. If after 2 years nothing has changed, I'm moving to Apple Silicon. I will get a Mac.
Yeah. Wait, do Macs now support touch?
No, they don't, which is funny because macOS, the new version does look like something that would support touch, but it doesn't support touch, not yet
So
anyway.
no inking, no inking
No
either.
inking. I think the problem Apple's going to face very soon is the iPad Pro and the MacBook or the Macs are going to become very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's like, but which one? Yeah, one's going to have to eat the other for sure.
Wireless video reviews coming on Windows Central. I mean, it's a good question. Talked about it in the past. Budget. COVID-19 has hurt a lot of budgets,
Yeah.
including in our industry. We're doing well, by the way. As a site and a company, we're weathered the storm pretty well here. And a lot of that's because we have smart people working. So part of it's budget, part of it's because I'm in a pandemic and lockdown is real. So it's hard to get a videographer here. And we don't have the right team in place right now to sort of make it happen. I would love to bring back video. Zach's been doing some, and we'll be doing more. Someday, maybe I'll go back to the office and try to shoot my own video. I'm always doing 9,000 things, so it's hard to just be like, I'm going to be a videographer this week. Though I may try, but I have to usually give up something else if I want to do that. So, because especially only typically work 40 hours a week, but work more than that often. So.
How likely is it? Excuse me. How likely is it that the new lifestyle stuff is already coming to 20H2? I mean, they do have the experience pack in version 2004. So I think by lifestyle stuff, you mean the slight redesign of they're no longer using accent colors. They're just either light or dark. And also they might have rounded corners. There's nothing really changing with lifestyles outside of that. They're not getting any new functionality or new sizes. They're literally just getting round corners and the color of them will change. And whether that's in 20H2, I honestly don't know. The experience pack thing is weird because it allows Microsoft to update set specific shell elements, but wow, I need a drink. Specific shell elements, but I don't know if the start menu is included in that. And maybe it will be at some point, but I think right now it's the snipping tool, the keyboard. Maybe and something else, but I can't remember what. It's not 20H2. It'll definitely be next year's release. Who is running stuff like the launcher over at Microsoft? How does Windows Central position itself around Microsoft's extending deep into iOS and Android? So the team running the launcher is Microsoft's mobile experience team, which deals with the launcher, Edge, and all of most of Microsoft's mobile apps on Android and iOS. The launcher team's great. I love the launcher. I love the people who work on the launcher and your phone. Like that's all under the same team, I believe, and they are all fantastic people. Regarding how Windows Central positions itself, we've been doing this for a while now. Ever since Windows Phone sort of passed away. Ever since Windows Phone died, we've sort of pivoted quite well to covering Microsoft on Android and iOS. It's very easy. If it's a Microsoft related product and on Android and iOS, then it belongs on Windows Central. The name Windows Central, I realize, has the name Windows in it, but it extends to mean Microsoft. It should say Microsoft Central. In fact, if you go to microsoftcentral.com, you'll find a very familiar website because we are essentially microsoftcentral.com. The reason we call ourselves Windows Central is because I think it's for legal reasons, right, Dan? Like calling ourselves microsoftcentral.com, we can do it, but it puts us in the firing line of legal problems because Microsoft is a trademark. And I've realized Windows is a trademark as well, but Windows is also a generic thing. It's a Windows, So I think we get away with Windows, but Microsoft puts it in the file. But microsoftcentral.com is a website you can visit and read all of the latest Microsoft news.
See, there was one question. I don't know if there's a response. How come Windows 10 ARM can't run Office properly, but smooth in Mac OS on ARM? I don't understand the question entirely.
I think he's saying, so Microsoft is building Office for Mac on ARM, but it's native, whereas I think Office for Windows on ARM is native technically as well. It just pretends it's not native, right?
Yeah, this is why I'm trying to get my head wrapped around, because I run ARM devices all the time, and Office is pre-installed and runs beautifully on it. I have absolutely no problems. It's not slow. It's not laggy. It's smooth. And as Zach points out, it actually is compiled for ARM. There's this misconception out there that like it's emulated or something like that, but it has to do with what's called a shim. So because Office is a standalone product, but then there's a lot of third-party plugins that companies have released over the years that a lot of companies use in Excel and PowerPoint, stuff like that, to enhance, just like Adobe does. Those are all written, obviously, in 32-bit plugins and probably 64-bit too. The shim basically pretends Office is like 32-bit to the operating system. So when you go to install one of those, it goes, oh, my target's right there. That's a 32-bit Windows. I'm going to go install there, and it works. It's fine. If that shim that masquerade wasn't there, it would be like, sorry, you don't have a right version of Office to install. So a lot of people seem like they're confusing, that part of it. But as far as I know, generally speaking, Office is configured for ARM. It's native. The only limitations I'm aware of is because in 64-bit Office, you can run like massive files in Excel. And that's a kind of a fair point, except I would counter that if you're on the Surface Pro X, you're probably not going to be importing Excel files that are multiple gigabytes in size. You'd probably want to go to like an XPS 15 at that point, right? Because, it's meant for light computing, and there are limits there. That's the only limits I'm really aware of, though, when it comes to Office.
What do you think about Apple's move to introduce widgets on iPhone that resemble live tiles? I think it's a long time coming. In fact, honestly, it makes me want to use an iPhone again. I love the look of iOS 14, and those widgets and the ability to customize your home screen in such a way will only become more powerful when third-party developers pick it up. I've tried the beta very briefly, and right now it's only Apple stuff which supports it, which is fine, but I don't use Apple stuff. I can't wait to see Outlook or Edge, or maybe not Edge, but you get the idea, like Outlook, Microsoft Teams, Skype, possibly Xbox, OneDrive, for photos and stuff. Like, it's going to be great to see Microsoft's apps and taking advantage of that. And not even that, third-party ones, like Spotify, Twitter, whatever, Snapchat if you use it. Just see all those widgets and see how that works. I think it's going to be great. It is the live tile dream come to life for Windows Phone users on iOS. To the point at which I think iOS is the better choice if you're moving from Windows Phone. If you're still moving from Windows Phone, what are you doing? What are you hanging on to?
I did have people on Twitter tell me they're still using Windows phones. So.
Did you block them immediately? I'm joking.
No. Since Microsoft stores are closing, do we see Microsoft opening pop-up stores in Best Buy to promote Xbox Series X? So, Best Buy already has like a Windows section. If you ever go in there, it actually just says like Windows, and they actually have all the latest stuff there. And I'm sure they could do like in-store promotions. It's no different, like Samsung may have a little booth thing set up. So I'm sure there'll probably be something there like that. And, Microsoft and a lot of companies, Razer now has a partnership with Best Buy too. HP gets their stuff in their stores. So Best Buy has really become increasingly again, a vector for buying even Microsoft products versus the store. Best Buys are just ubiquitous. And Best Buy has actually weathered the storm pretty well with this, and especially because customers do like to go in there, look at it, maybe order it online or just pick it up from the store. So, yeah. This question, I'm going to repeat my question. Do you think Microsoft sees the open rebellion that will happen if Microsoft puts Facebook gaming into our Xbox dashboards and Xbox game bars? I think as far as I know, they're not doing that.
Yeah.
And at the very, I mean, I wouldn't object to the idea of like, it's an optional plugin. Like if you want to install Facebook gaming, you install the app and then it plugs into the streaming ability, and you set it sort of like how you can set Dolby or DTS as your default headphone audio. You set Facebook or YouTube as your default game streaming. I'd actually want on Xbox for that to happen. So if like I'm an Xbox gamer, I can be like, I want to choose YouTube, I have Amazon, I have Facebook streaming, I choose which one I want, install it, plug it in, and now my game streaming goes to that. I think that's cool. I don't think though they're going to like force Facebook integration to Xbox. That doesn't make sense.
If this hasn't been discussed yet, thoughts on Skype for Windows 10 and Skype Desktop being consolidated? It sucks. We hate the new Electron app for Windows 10. It is worse in every way, and I wish Skype would die.
Yeah. Do you think Windows will kill the Microsoft Store at some point? No.
Yeah, right.
But it's still an important way for app distribution, including Microsoft's own inbox apps, which get updated directly through the store. There's also movies and rentals, which I think is still probably brings in some revenue too. But that store could definitely, Zach wrote an article on that a couple weeks ago. That store needs some help. That's another thing that just needs a major refresh. It's still infuriating to be like hit install and that button like will take 10 seconds before it's like, oh, okay, I see you want to install this. There's just so many errors in the store still, so they need to fix that. They just need to redo the store.
Yeah.
But they have the desire to?
Yeah, I think the problem with removing the Microsoft Store is that it takes a lot of work to do that, because it's such an integral part to the Windows as a service experience that you can't just delete the app and be done with it. You would have to change a lot of things to keep Windows current without it. So I think it's easier for Microsoft to just leave it as is, which is what I think we're seeing happen. It's just like, we'll keep it the way it is. We don't need to deal with that no more.
With the demise of retail stores, how do you feel it will impact Surface sales? So we had a whole discussion about this earlier in the podcast.
And I don't think it will.
Yeah, and long story short is, I actually think that played into the decision here. I think they weren't seeing a material impact on Surface sales, even with the stores closed, which made them say, do we really need these stores in the first place? And, even if they had a decline in sales in the stores, they probably saw an uptick in online sales that made up for it, in which case, why pay for all that overhead? So I think that's the answer right there.
Will Microsoft ever update the Surface Studio with current CPUs and more RAM to bring it out of 2019 and into 2020? Out of 2017, more like. Surface Studio 3 is a thing Microsoft is working on. I think if it's going to be announced, it will be announced later this year at the earliest, and I assume it will have updated CPUs and RAM. Someone was saying hopefully it's got thinner bezels as well. I'd like to see that. I think it's easy for Microsoft to do that on the Studio, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's important to remember, like, going back to that Panasonic tablet I reviewed, it runs, I put this in context. This is important because specialized tools like Surface Studio, I know it's like this dream PC to have and own and all that kind of stuff, but it's really meant for specific audience, engineers and artists and stuff like that. I think they're less concerned about some of those things, although you can make the argument faster is always better. The reason I point this out, that new Panasonic tablet I mentioned earlier that I reviewed starts at $2,699. That's the starting price for this thing. And it runs a processor from 2017. Okay. But for that audience, it's only a full HD display. But for that audience, how it doesn't matter because it only needs to run a couple apps well. It doesn't need to be a Samsung high-end consumer device, right? So companies can both release super stupid expensive stuff that you would never afford to buy with really old hardware, and they do that for specific reasons. And that's how Studio is not that extreme, obviously, but it is on that spectrum. It's not technically a consumer device where like Surface Pro is, where it does get those yearly updates. So I understand the point, but I also feel like a lot of people who are using Studio aren't like gnashing their teeth. I think the biggest thing was getting rid of the hard disk drive, and the SSD was way better.
How important is Windows 10 X being perfect at launch to Microsoft's long-term success? I think it's only important to Windows 10 X, really. Like, if Windows 10 X fails, then Microsoft just goes back to doing what it's doing with Windows 10. You know, Windows 10 X is making no money for them right now, but Windows 10 is. So while it affects the long-term success of Windows 10 X, if Windows 10 X launches and it's buggy and broken and doesn't do everything that people expect it to do, then it won't get past a couple of years on the market. It needs to be perfect at launch. Otherwise, we'll just have another Windows RT on our hands, and that's just not. We can't have that because Windows 10 X is the better version of Windows, in my opinion. Architecturally, from the ground up, it's been rebuilt. We've talked about it 1,000 times. You get the idea, but I just think it's the future of Windows. It should be the future of operating systems built by Microsoft.
What's the store like on 10X? Is it just a current store?
Just same store, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it is.
There's still room
there.
there.
It is pre-release, so yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. There's still room there for things to change. Don't you think, though, with Microsoft closing its stores, customer support online will in the long term hurt the Surface brand more? And that's because the customer service support is so good at the physical stores. It's an interesting point, and right now you're right, because we discussed that on the podcast that online support is not very good, mostly because they're almost like two separate companies. If you ordered from Microsoft Online, from the Microsoft Store online, it's a different Microsoft Store than the physical stores. Like it didn't come from if I ordered right now something, like it wouldn't come from, say, my Microsoft Store. It comes from a separate distribution channel. And the people who run that online stuff are separated from the Microsoft Store. They actually are separate. And so it's true, online is worse. In theory, and Microsoft has kind of said this is what they want to do, the people that are not going to be part of the store, physical stores, are going to be transitioned over to these kind of roles of customer support. And, like I said, directly dealing with IT and stuff like that, like in my town. And so there's that opportunity there. Also, without all that overhead of store leases, they could take that money and sink it back into sort of customer support and ensuring those systems are better and more robust to make up for it. They've kind of said that that's what they want to do, but it definitely remains to be seen if that's what will happen.
Right, a couple more questions, and I think we'll head off. Is Qualcomm working on any new CPUs for Windows? I think there was a rumor this week, in fact, that Qualcomm is working on an 8CX Plus, I think, or some kind of revision to that, which I assume will be a little bit more powerful and stuff.
They have to have multiple chips in development that are along on the timeline. It takes a while, but they're ramping up. I mean, I feel like this Qualcomm thing was like, when it was first announced, it's like, all right, are we going to get like leftover chips? Which is actually what happened, the first one, right? It was basically a leftover chip. And now they've been in position to a customized chip that was more customized offline. And then they made it like a completely separate chip, right? And so they're moving this. And I feel like the Qualcomm thing could have just been like this one-off, like make a processor and let it ride for 3 years. But they've been iterating pretty quickly on this stuff. Not as quickly as I would technically like. I would like to see but the sales aren't there yet, right, to necessarily drive that. But it's a chicken egg thing. So, but hopefully Qualcomm will sink more money. Again, Qualcomm has its own division focused on Windows. They have budgets. They have to work within those budgets. They have, time frames and all that kind of stuff. So,
do you think Apple choosing to use live tiles makes it mainstream might impact the design language of Windows 10X? I doubt it. I think Microsoft's very set in stone in the idea that it's just going to be a grid of icons, and I don't think that will change.
Does Microsoft telemetry tracking not really contribute to quality control? I'm sure it does. Like they definitely get valuable information. I think
Yeah.
telemetry is important.
I bet Windows would be worse without it.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely good. I think the question is, does it solve the problem as much as having like a fleet of humans testing this stuff, and whose job it is to sort of debug? I think the answer is no, it hasn't lived up to that. But that's a question for Microsoft to sort of answer.
Can you please try and get more interviews? We're not tired of you guys, but it's cool to get some insight from the people that create these products that we use.
I agree 100%. It's something that's on both Zach and I. We're both, I do like 9 jobs at Windows Central, and if I could just plan for the podcast, and that was kind of the only thing I did, it would be kind of nice. But so a lot of this is like Zach knows, I literally show up like 5 minutes before the podcast, and I'm like, all right, I have my camera on, record me, make this happen. But yeah, I'm going to try to put more effort in to get people on our podcast more. So but Zach pointed out too that, sometimes it's a question of like with Microsoft, it's hard because I can't just ask people directly at Microsoft, like Panos or someone like, hey, come on our podcast. Sure. All right. I'll be on their product. Like it all goes through PR first, and they have to approve of everything. And I've asked in the past to have people on here from Microsoft, and they've never once obliged, I don't think.
Well, when we had Jason on late last year, that is something that I planned with Jason at Build 2019. That's May 2019. And because of PR, we could have done it without PR, but I think he would have gotten in trouble. So we decided to go through the official channels. And we went through May, June, July, August, September, October, when at the Surface event, someone from the PR team came over and said, hey, I know I've been meaning to get back to you about this interview thing you want to do. Then September, October, November, and then I think it was early December we actually finally got around to doing it. So it took most of the year to get that done. So that's when it comes to Microsoft people, at least, since we're not like The Verge or Wall Street Journal, it isn't as instant for us. It's like we have to beg and prod and plead for a very long time before we get what we want.
But that said, companies like HP, Dell, Lenovo,
yes, that's true.
They're a little bit better sometimes at making their engineers available. And so I'll try to work on that as these new devices come out, and try to get people specialists on here and stuff like that. Yeah. I think it's a really good point.
Someone says, just get Jen, Jason, or Brandon on the podcast. That'd be great. But again, we've got to go through PR. But not only that, we can only really get them on when there's something for them to talk about. We can't just sit there and ask them about Windows 10X and the Surface Duo and what's coming next, because they can't talk about any of that stuff. It has to be when announcements regarding the thing that they work on happen. So we could have had Jason or Brandon on for the recent Windows Insider rebrand, but it's going to take us a while to get them on the podcast, I think, and it won't be news next time it happens. So yeah, we'll definitely try and get. I'd say I might float some just heads up. Next time there's a big announcement, let us know in advance so we can get you on the podcast.
All right, I think that about wraps it up for us.
Yes. So thank you for tuning in, guys. Mixer people, thank you for watching on Mixer. You are very loyal. Hopefully you follow us, continue to watch our streams on YouTube and whatnot. You can follow us on Twitter, and we'll keep you updated on when we are going live and provide all the relevant links and stuff. Hopefully you was able to use all of your Mixer points. I saw lots of people throwing in like stickers and stuff, which was super fun.
Oh yeah, I should have done that.
Yeah, I was trying to. I honestly don't know how to do it. So yeah.
Pile of embers.
But until then, thank you so much for watching, and we shall see you next week on YouTube. Goodbye, everyone.